Hi, I'm Andy Schmuckler. I want to start by saying there are two questions. Um, One is, does the Constitution say that Donald Trump should be barred from being on the ballot in 2024? And to that, the answer is yes, and I'll explain why that is. But there's a second question too, which is, would it be best to disqualify him and decide that he won't be president again through the application of the 14th Amendment, or to leave that aside and let things take their course electorally, which is to say, let Trump get the Republican nomination, let him run in the general election to become president, and let the electorate decide. And to that, I say the answer is, it's not clear. It's a question worth asking. It's something to look at. There's a context in which to look at it that I want to also indicate. And apropos of that, let me introduce myself. Besides what else I am, I'm a guy who spent the last 30 years seeing the dark force that was taking over the right. First in the form of Rush Limbaugh, for example, which led me to do talk radio for 10 years out here in Virginia's Shenandoah Valley in order to try to counter the poisoning that I saw Rush Limbaugh doing. But it was really in 2004 that I saw something very dark. They'd taken over pretty much the whole Republican Party in the form of the W presidency. And I've been working more or less full time to sound the alarm since then. And now people think that, yeah, now that we see the world that Trump creates, people are saying, yeah, there's something really dark going on here. But anyway, I saw it because paying attention to the forces at work in the human world is really my whole life's work. And this American crisis really got my attention in 2004. And it led in 2011, 2012, I got so frustrated with the Democrats and with Obama in particular, whom I otherwise really think is a wonderful man. But he was blowing it, and it led me to become the Democratic nominee for Congress out here in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, which is a 2-to-1 Republican area. Under the slogan "Truth for a Change," I saw the lie was defeating the truth way too often. So that's the background in which this guy, me, brings to this question. And so let me say, first of all, why it seems to me fairly clear that what the Constitution that the Constitution would simply say, Trump is the kind of guy we had in mind. He took an oath to protect the Constitution, then he tried to overthrow it. He should never be allowed to hold public office again. It makes a distinction. It's, I think, interesting. I don't know if anybody has observed what the signification, but it's not. It doesn't disqualify anybody who just tries to overthrow the Constitution, but only if they'd taken an oath to uphold it. I mean, I could have easily imagined writing the amendment so that everybody who attacked the Capitol, for example, should never be allowed to run for public office because they show the lawlessness that was so serious, because it's nothing more serious than overthrowing the Constitution, which is why the oath emphasizes defending and supporting the Constitution. That is the ball game for us Americans. So everybody, but no, it has to be like a two-part crime. There's the crime of attacking the Constitution, but to be disqualified, you also have to have committed the sin, the sacred offense, the crime of breaking the oath you took with your hand on the Bible. So the decision in Colorado, people have criticized it some. I think it is a very, very clever thing that this judge did. The judge was in a position where she understandably didn't want to make a declaration of anything so big as the Trump problem is going to be solved this way. That is a very big statement, and she's an important person in a little small pond, but it's not for her to say. And she, I think, recognized that. And then the other states, judges that have done it, like Michigan and Minnesota, also are not inclined to arrogate to themselves the ability to make such a big statement. So she basically sidestepped the legal question. She said, oh, he can be on the ballot. But what was clever about it was, first, as people have observed, she as a finding of fact, she observed this guy, Trump, is guilty of insurrection, which really is the important thing that she was in a position to say. And she doesn't just say it, she shows it apparently. Not that I have read the document, but I've heard good people like Neil Katyal and Andrew Weissman talking about this. I really love being able to go to law school these days, because Trump has given me more legal education than I've had since I took a course in constitutional law in 1964, which was the best lecture course I ever took. But so she finds that he did, in fact, do the thing that the 14th Amendment said was the no-no that disqualifies. And then she uses these super flimsy arguments to say, but he can stay on the ballot because, and they really don't, they're lousy arguments. And I feel sure she knew they were lousy arguments. She just needed a fig leaf to send her finding of fact up the ladder to the Colorado Supreme Court, I guess today, but eventually to the Supreme Court of the United States. And I don't know what they're going to do, but I think it has become super clear that he should be disqualified. And speaking of legal experts, there's also the fact that excuse me, I got distracted. The two arguments that she makes, one's because the wording of the oath of the president doesn't have the word support in it. But if defend, protect, and preserve the Constitution isn't supporting, that's nonsense. And these legal experts, some of them, like this is just a fig leaf. And then there's a question of whether the presidency is actually an office of the United States. It's just real nitpicky stuff, and it won't hold up as a legal decision. But I don't have confidence in this Supreme Court doing what must be done. But Lawrence Tribe and what's his name, Michael Luttig, the most revered of conservative justices of these times, apparently, they wrote jointly something which makes the argument for why Trump can't run. And I've heard Luttig. I haven't heard Well, I've heard both of them actually, but mostly Ludig has been on TV, and they just make a compelling case. But this is not an honest Supreme Court. And in addition, the Supreme Court would be justifiably scared. I mean, there'd have to be corrupt reasons why they might overrule the Constitution. I mean, this wouldn't be the first time these people have abused the Constitution. But there also is a good reason why one might on the Supreme Court hesitate and just hope to find some excuse not to be the ones that say, take this guy who is the most powerful figure in American politics and yank him permanently off the political stage. That's a pretty strong move. And Lord knows we need to be protected against against Trump and all that he represents. I mean, this guy is making a serious threat to American democracy, more and more blatant. So American democracy is really what's at stake. And then I get to my pragmatic perspective, where to me the issue for I guess I wouldn't go back to the Limbaugh radio time, but for the last 20 years, for me, the basic issue is, can American democracy be protected? So for me, the question is, what is the best course to take if your goal is the protection of American democracy from a fascist force, which has been rising on the right for 30 years, but in Trump really takes a blatantly obvious and ugly form. I mean, calling your opponents vermin and summoning up violence as something to use and all the rest of the things. I mean, they're right out in the open. And the fact that they're right out in the open suggests that maybe, I mean, it's not like Nixon, who seemed pious on the outside but was a crook on the inside. This guy is a thug, a liar, a bully, a cheat, a thief, even a murderer. All of those are right in front of us. And if it is that obvious, maybe this is a time where and I'm not saying this is the case. I really am myself genuinely uncertain. So this argument is to present a side of it. If the judges say, bye-bye Trump, there are tens of millions of people, the people who are going to make this guy the Republican nominee, even though all of his lies and crimes and character defects are right out there where everybody can see them. There's a lot of people out there in a frame of mind that's kind of hard to understand, but it is willing to embrace what is blatantly fascistic. And that's there. That's the reservoir of this evil that we're having to contend with. It is because of the Republican base that Trump is able to control the Republican Party, because his supporters will knock anybody he says out of their political careers. And apparently some of them are also worried about them and their families being subject to violence. That all resides in the Republican base. So there are two possible scenarios. Well, I guess there are three. Well, first, the pair. One is the judges kick Trump out of politics. And then we've got to contend with, how's that going to play out in this society? We got tens of millions of people who are in whatever that frame of mind is. And we know that a certain segment of them are also willing to use political violence. And that's not going to be condemned by the rest of them. So that's one scenario. The judges put down a fiat, by which I don't mean the Italian car, a judicial fiat, not an automotive fiat. And the people say, you are taking our leader. And leader in that cult means something very powerful. And how's that going to play out? How's that going to what's going to be unleashed? What's going to happen? What kind of political violence would ensue? How well would it be? Would the rest of the society be able to cope with it? How would that play out over the course of some years in terms of, will American democracy and the rule of law survive? Or will it set off a chain of events which turn out to be too dangerous to set off? I don't know, but we got to think about it. What is the alternative? The alternative is you let the voters decide. I don't know quite how to think about the possibility that the American people might elect this guy in a general election. I mean, even with the distortions that are introduced by the Electoral College, what a statement it would be about the state of American culture, civilization, the polity. If all of this could be in front of our eyes, counting what we learn day by day on these various trials about his crimes, and even in the face of all that, what if the American people actually, enough of them, choose this guy to give presidential powers to, after all we've seen how he abuses those powers? I don't know. Part of me feels like if that were the case, we've already lost our democracy. We've got so much political sickness in our society that we don't have the critical mass of what democracy requires of the people to be able to have a healthy democracy. I don't know if that's true or not. I mean, there's a part of me which just says, well, let's get through however we can and deal with the violence. I mean, we lived through Oklahoma City and all the people that guy killed. We've lived through, the synagogue in Pittsburgh. We've lived through the shopping center in near El Paso. We've lived through a lot. We've lived through what happened to Pelosi's husband. It's ugly. But then, history has ugly things in it, so you sometimes have to live through. And I guess the question is, what would we respond? The Civil War was something that was very ugly, which actually got fought. Maybe, people have talked about there being another American Civil War. Well, in effect, we do have a civil war going on, but it's of a very different nature. And it's not going to be two-pitched armies. Maybe there's lots of ways of conceiving what a civil war might look like. I think January 6th and the big lie and Trump getting renominated, they're ways in which the American Civil War is being conducted. And I think that we're going to have to fight some kind of a civil war. And the question is how? And one of the places we have to decide is, how we have to decide, but we should at least think it through. if we put it up to the electorate. Now, I just wrote something, had a live stream here about why I have faith that the American people will reject Donald Trump. But I admit that that I've been wrong sometimes. But I also claim to have a good batting average, so maybe I should have called it a track record. But I really believe that the American people can be shown what the choice is, and that they are clearly, there's a substantial majority that doesn't want fascism. So there's a part of me that wants the law to be enforced. I don't like the idea of the Supreme Court failing to do what the Constitution requires. And I think that Ludig and Lawrence Tribe, one revered conservative and one revered liberal constitutional scholar, coming together to make the case that this is what the Constitution says. He's exactly what they wanted to protect us from. I want that to be honored. I mean, I want the rule of law. I want to reestablish the Constitution. I don't like the idea of sort of pushing the Constitution aside because the politics of our sick American electorate make it maybe more prudent to fight the Civil War at the ballot box. But that's not going to settle it either, probably. Well, I mean, maybe it would, or maybe it wouldn't. I don't know. We had an election in 2020 that was supposed to, when Trump was impeached the first time, and Adam Smith, geez, getting my names wrong. Adam Schiff was out there arguing that you can't trust this guy. And the Republicans were saying, let the people decide in November. But then, they didn't honor that election. It was clean and clear and fair, and there was nothing wrong with that election. And Trump lost. It wasn't even all that close. In the Electoral College, and it was 7 million votes, and it was quite consistent with all the polls that had gone before. Let the voters decide. With these guys, they've already shown they don't honor elections. I mean, this Republican Party, even aside from 2020, has shown an unwillingness to accept the outcome of elections. In Wisconsin, they've backed off, but at least there was this talk that they were going to basically disgracefully undo the serious election that had just been held, in which the Democratic candidate won by 10 points. I mean, it was a referendum on what the Republican Supreme Court had been doing. And they don't like what the Republican Supreme Court has been doing. They don't like the gerrymandering. They don't like the abortion situation. And they elected this woman. And the Republicans were going to undo that. And there's a whole list of places where. So, okay, let's go to 2024 and let the voters decide. And I'm confident the voters are going to reject Trump. But then what? Would the Republican world rise up again on the basis of this was a hoax, it was a big steal? I don't know. I think there are ways of fighting to prevent that. I would raise this issue in the election itself, because Trump is basing his election on not besides imitating the Nazis. On a variety of things. He's basing his election on his big lie about the 2020 election. So that puts it front and center. So I think the Democrats should go at it both ways. What are you going to do when Trump loses? Are you so at war with democracy that you will only accept the results of elections that you win and then appeal to the American people? That's not how we play. That's not the system our founders gave us. I think that if it's played right, that one can emerge from that election with a lot of things having been moved in a good direction. Not just Trump being defeated, but the whole Republican Party being repudiated. because it is the Trump party. I mean, that's so easy to show. And again, a good Democratic campaign can show that the connections between this criminal traitor that they've chosen as their standard bearer and the various other things about this Republican Party. So I think it can come out fine. I think that this can be a showdown between democracy and fascism in America. I thought 2020 was the showdown, and we prevailed. But the battle did not determine the war, because for the first time in American history, the losing side simply said, we're going to hold on to power regardless. So that was them taking the war to a whole nother level. And it has continued. And there's going to be another climactic battle in 2024. And I think it can be won decisively. I have limited trust in the ability of the Democrats to wage this battle as powerfully as it could be waged. It will be waged in these terms. I mean, Biden has indicated that he's going to run on the basis of democracy versus fascism, and I applaud him for that. He did it in 2022, and the evidence is it was fairly successful. It moved 5 or 6% maybe. So he's going to do that again. But I think that we need more than Biden, because this is an issue for Americans to feel passion about. And that kind of oratory is not Biden's forte. He's not somebody to get to the microphone and inspire his people like Churchill or FDR or JFK at his inaugural. We're not going to remember his speeches or carve them into marble on the Washington Mall. But there are speeches that can be had. And I think that there are people, and Jamie Raskin, the representative from Maryland, comes to my mind as a voice that is both fully grounded in his having been a constitutional scholar, but also imbued with a kind of prophetic moral tone, which is appropriate when something as ugly as fascism is attempting to destroy something as beautiful as a system of government where the will of the people is sovereign, and the government gets its powers from the consent of the governed. And the system is premised on the idea that all people are of equal value. That is so much better than fascism, which is the opposite in all respects. I mean, fascism, not power up from the bottom, the will of the people, but power down from the tyrant. Not serving the interests of the whole, but the whole made an instrument in the gratification of the dark impulses of the few or the one. I mean, Donald Trump is a monster. It would be hard to find other people whose will is more destructive. He is the embodiment, as is Putin, by the way, of the spirit of the gangster. Very opposite of the direction we want to go as a civilization. The democracy it has liberty, which allows people to speak the truth as they know it and to publish the truth as they know it. Trump called the press the enemy of the people. That's how fascism works. In every respect, fascism is a mirror image in terms of the workings of power, of democracy, and democracy is the one that leads to human thriving, which is the good. So I think that the time is coming. Maybe we need to wait until the conventions when Trump becomes the Republican standard bearer, where the campaign to defeat Trump needs to ring through the country with a powerful vibration as we go into a civil war, hopefully altogether peacefully, but probably only mostly peacefully, to beat back a fascistic force by defeating Trump and the party that's been willing to make itself his instrument and acquit him from two impeachments, even though he was more impeachable a president than I imagine our founders could have imagined in a million years. Asked to describe a president who deserved to be impeached and to make the description very strong, I doubt they would have come anywhere close to Trump. But this Republican Party is his instrument. I would like to hear people like Jamie Raskin delivering a speech for the ages. And I don't know what other voices, but there are other voices, but Raskin's the one that I hear in my ears. But Elizabeth Warren, she's a plain-spoken, very bright, good woman. All that comes through. She could be a voice. There are a lot of people who could be a voice, but we do need to get to the level where people get stirred. I mean, the Battle Hymn of the Republic, as it's used in our movies about the old Civil War, as he died to make men holy, let us live to make men free, or die to make men free. There was a music that had to do with the spirit of liberty. That was what roused the Union to be willing to make the sacrifices that they made in holding the Union together and preventing the slave power from its lawless insurrection succeeding. Well, I think now we need to have words, music of words, of passion for the values at the core of American democracy, rousing in the American people some remembrance of this gift that we've been given as a people, that brought people from all over the world to these shores, that got the French to deliver to us the Statue of Liberty. Let us remind the American people of this treasure and conjure up in their minds the ugly thing that is threatening to bring all that down. That is the way this Civil War should be fought. The battlefield should be the ballot box. And I think that the outcome can be a decisive victory in this thing that I've been tracing since the early 90s, when Limbaugh and Gingrich started polluting the minds of the Republican base. And then Fox News came and started leading millions of people into a strangely paranoid frame of mind. I don't know if you know the stories, but I've been exposed to some stories of people whose parents were this way, and then they started watching Fox News and they became that way. And then what W did, like with the war on terror, I mean, what he did with 9/11 is one of the most cynical, despicable, destructive things that I'm aware of any president ever having done before Trump. There was national unity. He deliberately sacrificed it for political advantage in the 2002 election. He made a thing about the war on terror, just using people's fears, not for any practical purposes, just for his political gain. I mean, somebody like FDR, he was a wartime president, when we actually had something to be afraid of. The war was not going well for a while. We were facing major powers. Many of our young men were dying. His role was to make us less afraid, to give people confidence, as did Churchill. But W took 9/11 and he cultivated the people's fears for his political advantage. Pretty ugly. This has been gathering. This showdown, it is something that has been gathering. We have not, on the side opposing Trump, has not been strong enough soon enough to prevent this from being a real dangerous situation. Didn't have to get to this point, but here we are. And Trump is running for president. He will almost certainly be the Republican nominee. I happen to think that he will not win, but I do think it matters. First of all, we can't rule it out. A lousy campaign by the Democrats, and Trump could win. But also how we win. What kind of flame gets lit? So I don't know. I think I want the Constitution enforced, but I think the best route actually is to let the election play out as the showdown that America needs to have happen. Thank you. And if you're interested in seeing the larger context of how I see things and how I see the various forces at play in the human world and what we've got to do if we're going to be able to help human civilization survive for the long haul, I invite you to go take a look at my website, which is abetterhumanstory.org. I've got there the messages that I've been sending out to the Republican base, where I have op-eds that appear every week in the newspapers. I'm not claiming that I've moved their consciousness. Maybe I have, maybe I haven't, but I'm doing that seriously. And there you can find a better human story, which I say illuminates some basic issues and gives us a different understanding of a lot of what we see in the human world through history and in the American situation in particular. Anyway, I invite you to go take a look at it. I'm an old man who's been really seriously pursuing all these things in an almost obsessive way since I was in my mid-teens, accelerating into my 20s, and I've built something that I am very eager to share because I think it actually could be helpful. So that's where I'm coming from. Other than this particular question, which I've enjoyed talking with you, and I hope you found it illuminating in some way. Thank you for listening.